Picture this. It's a quiet Sunday. You're scrolling on your phone and you open your super balance for the first time in months and realise you have no idea if the fund it's sitting in is any good. Here's the thing most people never realise. You probably never chose that fund at all. You started a job, maybe at 22, ticked nothing on the paperwork, and someone in payroll dropped your money into a default. And if that's you, that's not a failure on your part. Almost nobody is told how this works. Today, I'll show you whether that set and forget fund is quietly costing you real money. If you've never looked at this before, you're in very good company. Millions of Australians are sitting in funds they never chose, and almost none of them have ever checked. So let me make it simple for you. 3 moves. First, find out where your super actually is and what you're paying in fees. Second, compare your fund's performance against the official benchmark. Third, decide whether to stay put or switch to something better. Each move is free, takes you under 20 minutes, and could be worth 6 figures by the time you retire. Here's the number that should make you sit up. If you're a 30-year-old on a $70,000 salary, stuck in a high-fee default charging 1% a year, instead of a low-fee fund at 0.6%, you'd retire with about $110,000 less. That's straight from ASIC MoneySmart and APRA's MySuper data for 2024. That's just a 0.4% fee gap. It sounds tiny, but here's the part most people miss. Across your whole working life, that fraction of a percent compounds into a small fortune. Let me show you exactly how. 3 moves, and you can start all of them today. Check where your super is and what you pay. Compare it against APRA's benchmark, then switch to a low-fee, strong fund if you find a better one. Each is free and each takes you under 20 minutes. So how does this even happen to you? Under the superannuation guarantee rules, if you don't choose a fund, your employer pays your super into their nominated default. And that default has to be a MySuper product regulated by APRA, the body that oversees super funds. But here's the part most people don't realise. The law only requires that default to be complying and MySuper authorised. There's no requirement that it be the cheapest or the best performing or anywhere close. Your employer picks one default once and most never look at it again. That's not your fault, but it is now your opportunity. And the fees vary a lot more than you'd expect. APRA's latest MySuper statistics show total fees and costs on a $50,000 balance ranging from about 0.4% to over 1.3% a year, with a median around 1%. So if you've been defaulted into a higher fee fund, you could be paying roughly double what someone in a low fee fund pays, for the same salary and the same contributions. And as MoneySmart points out, even a 0.5% difference in fees can quietly cut your final balance by tens of thousands. Same money in, just a leakier bucket. But here's where it gets sneakier. There's a second layer to this, and it catches a lot of people out. Since the 1st of November 2021, a reform called stapling means your existing super fund follows you from job to job. When you start a new role and don't actively choose, your employer checks the ATO for your stapled fund and pays into that one. The idea was genuinely good. Fewer duplicate accounts and less lost super. But here's the flip side for you. If your very first fund happened to be high fee or a chronic underperformer, that same fund can now follow you across decades and multiple jobs, unless you step in and change it yourself. And I want to be upfront with you here. Not every MySuper fund is good just because it carries that label. Under the Your Future, Your Super test, APRA measures each product against a benchmark, and any fund that underperforms by more than 0.5% a year over 8 years officially fails. If you're stapled to a mediocre fund returning 0.8% less each year, you'd retire with around $480,000 versus about $630,000 in a strong fund. That's a $150,000 gap, purely for doing nothing. Now, here's the belief that keeps most people stuck. Here's the myth that keeps people frozen, and you might be carrying it too. The thinking goes, it's a MySuper product my employer chose, so it must be one of the best. It's an easy assumption to make, but MySuper authorised only means the fund is complying and APRA regulated, nothing more. APRA's own data shows fees vary by more than double between funds, and some MySuper products fail the performance test outright. Being defaulted in guarantees you nothing about fees or returns, so it's worth checking yours yourself. So let's put it together for you. On one side, high fees, roughly $110,000 lost over a working life from a 1% versus 0.6% fee gap per MoneySmart and Opiara. On the other, underperformance, around $150,000 from a fund trailing by 0.8% a year. And here's the part most people miss. These two leaks don't happen separately. They stack on top of each other, in the same account, at the same time. Let me show you what that looks like for someone real. Meet Jess. She's 32, a marketing coordinator earning $80,000 a year, with $55,000 sitting in her super. She never chose a fund. She was defaulted into an industry MySuper product at 22, then stapled to it through 3 job changes. She's got 35 years until retirement, and she'd never once looked under the hood. If that sounds a lot like you, watch closely, because here's what Jess found when she finally checked. Discovery 1. Jess pulled out her annual statement and found she was paying 1.1% a year in total fees and costs. Then she checked APRA's figures and saw top quartile MySuper funds charging around 0.6% for a similar balanced option. So she ran both through the MoneySmart calculator. At her current fees, she's on track for about $460,000 at retirement. At 0.6%, about $560,000. Fees alone were quietly costing her $100,000. And she had no idea until she looked. Discovery 2, and this one's a completely different problem. Jess looked up her fund in APRA's Your Future, Your Super Performance results, and saw it only just passes, having trailed its benchmark by around 0.4 to 0.5% a year over 8 years. Comparing 10-year returns, her fund delivered about 6.5%, while a top industry fund delivered 7.5%, running that 0.8% higher net return through MoneySmart. A switch would lift her from $460,000 to $580,000, about $120,000 more, even after fees. Discovery 3 was the one she never saw coming. Buried in her statement, Jess was paying about $300 a year in default death and TPD insurance premiums she didn't even know she had. Now, I want to be balanced here. That cover isn't always a bad thing, and for some people it's genuinely valuable. But MoneySmart warns that unnecessary insurance in super can seriously erode a younger member's balance. If Jess trimmed her cover so premiums dropped to $150, and that saved money stayed invested for 35 years, it's worth about $13,000. Small leak, real money. Add it all up. Fees, underperformance and unnecessary insurance. By staying put in her default stapled fund, Jess was risking around $150,000 over her career. Now, I'll be honest with you, this is modelled with the ASIC MoneySmart calculator on a balanced option. These are estimates, not guarantees, and your own numbers will differ. But the direction is unmistakable. Doing nothing is still a decision. And as you can see, it comes with a price tag. So could this be you? 3 quick signs. 1, you've never actively chosen your super fund. 2, you don't know your fund's total annual fee off the top of your head. And 3, you've never checked whether your fund passes APRA's performance test. If any of those ring true, don't worry. That's exactly who the next 3 moves are for. Let's walk through them together. So where does this leave you? You don't need to overhaul your whole financial life. You just need a few specific, practical steps. You can start today. 3 moves. Let's do them together. Move 1. Find your super and what you're actually paying. Log into MyGov, link it to the ATO and go to Super, then Manage, to see every account you hold and which one is your stapled fund. Then open your current fund's website or your latest annual statement and look for fees and costs, the total percentage you pay each year on your main investment option. Write that number down because you'll need it for the next step. Just remember, this is general information, not personal advice. 3 quick steps. First, log into MyGov, link the ATO and open Super, then manage to list all your funds. Second, note the total percentage fee on your main option. Third, rerun the MoneySmart calculator with fees 0.4 to 0.5% lower, so you can see the dollar gap for yourself. What good looks like for you? Total fees around 0.6% a year or less. Move 2. Compare your fund against the benchmark. Head to APRA's Your Future, Your Super Performance Test results and find your MySuper product. Check whether it failed or whether it's sitting uncomfortably close to that minus 0.5% underperformance trigger. Then find your fund's 10-year return on its website and compare it to the leading balanced MySuper funds. If you spot a gap bigger than 0.5% a year, that's a red flag worth acting on. And here's how to decide what to do about it. 3 quick steps. First, look up your product in APRA's performance test list. Second, find your option's 10-year return on your fund's site. Third, compare it against the top balanced MySuper funds. What good looks like for you? A fund that passes comfortably, not on the edge, with returns sitting in the top half of comparable funds. Move 3. Decide whether to stick or switch. Use the government's Your Super comparison tool, which you can reach through MyGov, to compare fees and performance across MySuper products and shortlist 2 or 3 low-fee, strong performers. Then complete the ATO's standard choice of fund form with your chosen fund and hand it to your employer, so your future contributions go exactly where you want them. And here's a bonus. That choice also becomes your stapled fund for any future jobs. 3 quick steps. First, shortlist 2 or 3 low-fee funds on the Your Super tool. Aim for 0.6% or less with solid long-term returns. Second, complete the standard choice of fund form and hand it to your employer. Third, log back into MyGov a little later to confirm your contributions are landing in the new fund. What good looks like for you? 1 main fund, low fees, and no test failures. Why does this matter for you right now? Look at how the rules have shifted. In 2014, MySuper began. Default contributions had to go into an authorised MySuper product. Then in 2021, stapling started, meaning your existing fund now follows you between jobs instead of getting left behind. And in 2023, APRA's performance test began publicly naming the MySuper products that failed their benchmark. Put those together, and the message for you is clear. Stapling means a mediocre fund can follow you for decades, so checking once, today, matters more than it ever has. Once you've acted, let's make sure it actually worked. You should see your new fund listed in MyGov within a few weeks. Confirm that your next payslip super guarantee contribution is going to the fund you chose. And if you spot old accounts still lingering, roll them in so you stop paying duplicate fees and double insurance. Got questions about your own situation? Drop them in the comments. I read them. Everything I've shown you today comes from the ATO, Fair Work, ASIC's MoneySmart and APRA, the official sources. The links are all below, so you can check your own numbers and see exactly where you stand. So if you've made it this far, you now know something most people in your situation don't. How to check if your default super fund is costing you, and how to switch in 3 moves. Next, I'll show you how to consolidate multiple super accounts without losing valuable insurance, which is the very next thing you'll want once you've sorted your fund. Here's your 1 step for today. Open MyGov and find out which fund your super is actually in. That alone puts you ahead of most people. If you want to go deeper on getting your super right, that's exactly what we cover next. I'm Alex. I'll see you there.